Welcome, everyone. My name is Carrie Kenner, and I'm really excited that you're here today to talk about starting a business and the financial implications with my guest expert, Brenda Hargroves. I am a business and marketing coach, copywriter, and a birth doula trainer. And I'll talk a little bit more about my audience in a moment. But that is what I do. And I've been interested in the aspects of finances and starting a business, but never felt super confident about it myself. So a few years ago, Brenda and I were in a writing program together, and we met. We live on the opposite corners of the country, but we met through that program. And I started following her blog, which you can find at #LitBizLife. And I just loved her blog so much because she gave such simple, clear, helpful advice about money matters. She's also a writer, so she talks about her writing journey, and she's also wise about business. So it was just like this perfect combination of things that attracted me. So I've been following her for years now. And as I was getting ready to relaunch some of my doula trainings, I thought, I want to bring in a finance expert this time. And I know who I want it to be. I want it to be Brenda. So Brenda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in financial things and business and writing, if you want? Just tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Well, as far as entrepreneurship is concerned, in my past life, have owned two small businesses, which were fairly successful. So I've been in the entrepreneurial role for quite a while. As far as finance is concerned, that was an interesting thing because one of the things I also do is write grant proposals I used to do it for quite a few organizations, but now I've kind of limited it to two. But one of those two, years ago, we wrote a proposal and included a financial coaching person in the proposal. And when we got funded, the ED did not have anyone to take that role. So it was the beginning of the summer. She was starting the program in the fall. So I took this all summer course on financial coaching and ended up teaching her class for 7 years. So I just kind of fell into financial coaching and just kept moving forward from there. So now I include a lot of, in addition to information about my entrepreneurship skills and experiences, I also talk about personal finances in my blog. Those are two things that I do cover quite extensively.
Yep. And that's why I found you, I think, because you're speaking to me. That I'm your target audience. And I think my audience is also going to really love your work as well. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask you about some advice about how to start a business. And I want to remind you, and also just whoever's watching this, to know about who my audience is and see if you can kind of be having them in mind as you're answering some of the questions I have. So my audience is primarily people in the birth profession. So they're birth professionals like doulas, midwives, nurses, lactation consultants, etc. And I also work with non-birth related businesses that are often in the healing professions, either nutritionists or body workers or therapists. And I work with other small businesses. They tend to just be kind of really heart-centered folks. So they have a lot of emotional literacy, but not necessarily financial literacy. And the vast majority of them are solopreneurs. They're one-person businesses. Sometimes they might have a small staff. And I think that's one of the things that's super challenging for them to start businesses. Also, the majority of my audience have never run a business before. And often, at least in the case of the doulas that I've trained, they weren't even thinking that they had to start a business. All they knew is they wanted to be a doula. They come get the doula training, and then they realize, oh, shoot, if I want to go out and make a living at this, I have to start a business. And so it's often a little bit of a surprise. and they need a lot of information quickly. So I'm hoping that we can answer some of their questions today. Okay.
Okay.
So, what does a new entrepreneur need to know before starting a business? What's your general advice or things that they should be thinking of?
I think there are a couple of things that people need to think about in terms of business ownership. And so let's start with the basics. I think the basic things are, why are you starting a business? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think it's also important to think about how you define success for your
Mm,
business. And these answers are going to differ according to the individual. So I think everybody needs to take a moment to do a personal assessment and figure out what they know about themselves. So some of the things you might want to think about are, what do you enjoy doing? And obviously, you're going to do your best when you take pride in what you're doing. I think you also need to find something that allows you to be yourself. So for example, are you comfortable interacting with other people, or are you an introvert? Now, I'll tell you right now, I'm an introvert. So even the thought of doing this interview was nerve wracking for me. But I just felt like it was something that we needed to accomplish together. So just move forward with it.
yeah.
Another thing you need to consider is, do you prefer physical or creative work? I think that's really important because some people just can't sit and do something all day. They need to be moving around, they need to be, exercising themselves. And another thing that's important is, what allows you to develop your talents and your interests. You want to pursue something that's going to stretch you to become better, or to, I guess, to learn more. I also think most successful entrepreneurs have certain traits in common. So you need to determine whether your personality matches those traits. So what are some of those traits? I think one of them is confidence. You need to feel that your business is going to be successful. You understand that it's not going to be smooth sailing, but you're convinced that it's going to be worth the effort,
Mm.
which leads me to the next trait, which is patience. We've all pretty much heard that it takes 3 to 5 years for a business to start to show signs of success. And success can mean different things. You might consider your business successful if it's earning enough to pay you a competitive salary. Or you might consider your business a success if it affords you more leisure time. It depends on what your goals
Mhm,
are.
mhm.
So, whatever your definition of success is, it's going to take a lot of patience to get there. So, we need to be prepared for that. And another thing I think about is flexibility, because people often go into business because they want to be in control. They want to run the business a certain way. Well, I'm here to tell you that things happen, and you might find yourself in a position of having to completely adjust your business practices. So being flexible and willing to accommodate change is definitely a plus.
Mhm.
I think the most important point, entrepreneurial trait, is consistency. Do what you say when you say you're going to do it. I think being known for reliability is going to take your business further than anything else. Those are basically the four things that I think of in terms of your trait initially, but there are some other things that we can put in the chat. I have a couple of links that we can put in that talk about important thoughts to consider when starting a business, and
Great.
also some additional characteristics of a true entrepreneur. Do you want to put them in the chat, or should I?
Well, what I'll do is any of the links and resources that we want to give to folks are going to be on a slide at the end of this interview. So anything that Brenda mentions, any of our website links, our hashtags, and et cetera, you'll find them there.
Okay.
So, one of the things you mentioned, Brenda, is that a lot of people go into their own business to have control. They don't want somebody else telling them what to do. They want to define their own hours, et cetera. But they don't think of the flip side, which is you have all the control, you also have all the responsibility. There's no one to share workload with. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could speak to other pitfalls of starting a new business that solopreneurs may not have thought of.
Off the top of my head, there are two things that when I talk to people, I hear most often. And The first thing is what you mentioned is wearing all the hats
Mhm.
in the business. And this conversation reminds me of one that I had with my godchild recently, who has decided she wants to be a business owner, but she wants somebody else to do the day-to-day tasks.
Mhm.
And I had to explain to her that that is not a realistic goal. When you're undertaking a small business, you are going to be responsible for everything in the beginning. You're the chief cook and bottle washer. And another thing to consider is in order to do all these tasks, you have to be an organized person. So your organizational skills are going to be challenged. And if you're disorganized in your personal life, you're likely to be disorganized in your business life.
Mhm. What that makes me think of is, people have heard, I'm sure, about virtual assistants. And so, yeah, they might have this notion that I'm going to own this business, but I'm going to hire a virtual assistant to do all the things for me, not realizing that you have to train that virtual assistant, which means you have to know how to do all the things in your business. Like certainly you don't need to know how to do a lot of technical things. Like you may not need to know how to create designs in Canva or make social media posts on TikTok, but you do have to know a lot about what goes into those things so that you can give direction to your assistants. So I think that that is just a really important point, that you may get to the point of not having to do all the things and wear all the hats, but you still have to know intimately how your business is going to be run. Would you agree
And
with
the
that?
only way to and I think the only way to do that is to jump in and do it yourself.
Hmm.
I can't see turning over I can't see being an entrepreneur and turning over the daily business of my business to someone else.
Yeah.
That to me is not being an entrepreneur. That's an investor. You're investing in somebody else's business. That's what it sounds like to me.
There you
So
go. Yeah.
that's a tough one for me to be able to accept.
Hmm. Yeah.
The other thing I think about in terms of pitfalls is having limited resources. When you're first starting out, you might not have the money in your budget to obtain all the resources you need to grow your business. And especially during these times, you're probably going to find that actual startup costs are much more than you originally estimated. So, since you're likely to be working alone until the sales are enough to invest in additional resources, all of this is going to take time to grow your business to the next level before you can afford to have or institute the tools that you need.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
those are the two pitfalls that I mostly hear about when I'm talking to people about starting a business.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what would you tell somebody to know if they're ready to start a business financially or otherwise?
I think the first thing I would tell them is to ask other business owners about drawbacks they've experienced. Because I think talking to other people is going to be and researching that through talking to other people is going to be your best resource
Mhm.
for finding out, how to avoid some of these pitfalls. And then that way you're likely to remain ahead of the curve and be able to build a resilient and adaptable business when you've already taken into consideration some of the pitfalls that you might run into at the start.
When I was starting a business, and this was like 25 years ago, I went to the Small Business Administration and found tons of resources. But I also realized that something about me is that I'm very much a do-it-yourselfer. So I started my business, truly from nothing and just did all this research. And I found a wealth of information. And I went to classes that, back then were in person. I'm sure everything's online now. I don't know if you have much experience with the Small Business Administration, and if you have, what it's been like, or if there's other ways that people might get information, maybe that's like if you interview a business owner, you're going to hear their story. And I agree that's really, really important, but it may not be as objective information that as they might need. Do you have other ideas?
I I have not had a lot of experience with the SBA. I've never even used that as a resource. I have all of my everything I've learned about entrepreneurship has been trial and error and talking to other people who own small businesses and listening to the advice that they have to have.
Hmm.
I think research, you're right, research is a good way. Google is always your friend, and you can find out a lot of information through that. But in terms of in terms of really having everything you need to start a bit, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to just jump in and start your business and do some of the learning as you go along.
Hmm. So, what are the financial considerations that somebody thinking about starting a business should put in, have in mind?
I think before we talk about that, I really think we needed to talk about what it means to be financially literate. And I
Mm.
think financial literacy has a really broad definition. It can mean almost anything having to do with managing your money. It's having the ability to understand and use skills such as personal finance management, budgeting, investing, and retirement planning. People forget about retirement, and I tell you, it comes sooner than you think. It really does. I really think the goal to achieve financial objectives and build your wealth and learn to deal with challenges by making sound choices for the present and the future is really the crux of what financial literacy is all about.
Hmm.
So, and I think managing your finances really does relate to building a successful, sustainable business.
Hmm.
Starting a full time or even a part time business is work and it takes time. So you need to think about, can you afford to cover your monthly expenses while starting a business, and for how long can you keep that up? Your earning potential of your business should also be a consideration. How long do you think it's going to take your business to become profitable? And will your monthly expenses cover everything you need in the business until that happens and the business is able to sustain itself? After that, then you can start to think about how much you need to grow your business and then how you're going to pay for that expansion. And all of this is all well and good if you're thinking for just one person. But what if you have to consider another person or other people when you're taking on this venture?
Hmm.
How do you decide to start? How does the decision to start a business affect your partner or your family? Is
Yeah.
your partner willing to take on more financial responsibility while you're growing the business? And does your partner realize and recognize the sacrifice that he or she is making? I think you have to have open and honest conversations that examine all of the potential scenarios and make some firm decisions before jumping in.
Hmm.
You might even want to agree on a time frame to look at the business progress, and then if necessary, define any adjustments you're willing to make at the end of that period. Because let's face it, your business is going to throw you enough surprises. You do want to have as many unforeseen obstacles out of the way as
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm. Hmm. And so you talked about folks who have partners and needing to get agreement from them and see if they're able to help you. What about people who don't have partners and it's all on them? So they don't even have that option of having somebody to rely on.
I really think that it's just then you need to determine whether you're ready to start a business. You need to determine if you're financially set to start a business, because you also need to realize that there are going to be bumps along the way. One of the things that you need to think about is possibly having do you have collateral? If you have collateral, that might be one of the easier ways to feel better about starting your business. Many years ago, I mentioned that I had small businesses before. I used to own an equity line to start a small business.
Mhm.
And this is an example of when I talked about your personal situation playing a critical role. Because at the time, my boyfriend and I were living together in a house that we purchased together. So I had to have his buy in order to set up a
Mm.
line of credit using our house as collateral. He did agree, and it turned out to be a positive investment on his part, but sometimes it doesn't always work out so smoothly. And then if you're in a situation where you don't have collateral, that's when your personal credit rating comes into play. Are you
Mm.
in a position to borrow capital? You need to understand how your credit score is determined and the criteria that lenders use to extend credit. they're going to want to know if you're a good risk. So having a solid credit rating is going to go a long way towards helping you borrow any funds that you need to have to grow your business.
Hmm.
And I think we also in the links are going to have a couple of articles about how credit works and the things that they don't tell you about credit score calculation.
Hmm. Yeah, those blog posts that you've had about credit scores have been so helpful, really enlightening. I think it's just, people don't know these things. And so everybody, you should go check those out.
And you're right, because when I was teaching the financial literacy course, it amazed me how many people in the class did not have good credit and didn't know what to do or how they could raise their credit score.
Hmm.
That was a major conversation during a lot of the classes that I taught on financial
Hmm.
literacy.
Yeah, so important. So you've mentioned different ways that people might fund a business. Before we talk more about more options for that, can you talk a little bit about what people might be thinking about to figure out how much money they might need to start a business? Like what goes into the startup expenses or ongoing operations? What are some things folks should be thinking about?
Well, I think the first thing most startup businesses hear is that you need a business plan.
Mm.
And I don't necessarily agree with this advice because when you're seeking investors, you might need to go the route of finding an appropriate business plan template, doing the research, filling in all the blanks, and completing a bunch of complex financial calculations. In my opinion, many small or even not so small businesses need what I call an operating plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the plan that outlines your personal strategy for running your business and focuses on your goals and how you plan to achieve them. And I'm saying this from experience because when I started a temporary and permanent placement agency years ago with a partner, we spent a great deal of time writing a business plan, creating a business plan that we never used.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the operating plan idea is works a little bit better, unless of course you're looking for investors. If you're looking for investors, you have to do a business plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is really great because I had that same experience. Every time I started a business, I would try to do a business plan using the business plan templates that I got either through the SBA or online, and they never fit. It was like trying to put a, square peg in a round hole. And I've never heard of an operating plan. So I'm super excited to learn more about that. Do you have a resource, a blog post, or a link that we'll be able to share for that?
I don't. It's funny that you mentioned that because one of the next few topics that I wanted to write about is an operating plan, but I have not done it up to this point. It is coming in the future.
All right.
But even with an operating plan, there are some financial considerations that you have to take in
Mhm.
mind. And that being said, you need to create a budget. That is probably the most important thing. A budget that lists your estimated expenses and your revenue. And I think for simplicity's sake, I would start with expenses and at least for the first year, assume that you're the one that's going to be investing in the business and will be the revenue source. And
Mhm.
then hope for a better outcome. And sometimes you will have a better outcome, but many times the first year or so, you are the source of revenue for running your business. So when creating your budget, you need to think about three things. I think the first thing you need to think about is prioritizing your expenses. Your immediate startup expenses depend on the type of business that you have, but you want to determine what you need to pay for versus what you can supply at little or no cost. In
Mhm.
other words, what are your tangibles? The things you already have, such as you might have office space available already. You may have some of the equipment you need. You might have some of the supplies you need. So you want to kind of prioritize what those immediate expenses are and then determine whether it's something you need to pay for or something that you can supply to the business.
Mhm.
And then you want to think about the immediate needs that have priority. For example, when we had our recruiting firm, recruiting temporary personnel was one of the placement agency's most expensive immediate needs because we had to do advertising, we had to get people to know who we were. Now everything is online, but at that time we also had to have an office. to interview temps. You don't need that now, but we did have to have an office. And then when we got temps and sent them out on assignments, we paid them weekly, but we billed our clients net 30 terms, which means that they had 30 days from the date of the invoice to pay for it. So that meant we needed to have enough cash on hand to cover our payroll until we received payment from our clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I think thinking about your immediate needs and determining how you're going to deal with them first is really utmost to an important part of your budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you need to also have a category for growth and expansion expenses. And this is where I have to stress that having a category in your budget for saving is really important. You want to plan for future business needs so when the time comes, you'll have some or even all of the funds you need to level up. But at the same time, you want to think about how and when you're going to address growth. And I think about this in terms of a recent interview that I did with a CPA. His name was Albert Hurston. And he pointed out that you need to concentrate on selling your product or your business before you even think about expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Sell your product first, make sure that it's a viable product and people are interested, and then you want to think about expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Promoted advertising is the best way to do that. So that, of course, is going to be an item in your budget. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a category in your budget. And his comments reminded me of a friend of mine who recently published a series of books and she's selling them on Amazon. One of the first things authors, I'm sure you've heard this, are advised to do is that they need to have a website.
Mm-hmm.
And even though my friend has a public relations background, she, interestingly enough, decided the smarter move was to start selling her books before taking on that expense. And I just got an email from her just before we started this conversation, and she let me know that she just got an order for 100 books. So I think her plan is really working out well for her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I will
Yeah.
add that in the case of being an author, Amazon can kind of serve as your website in the sense of people can go to Amazon and find your books or find the topics of their book, and they can do a search like they would do in Google to find a website. I don't know that it works that well for people in my audience, but what that story illustrates is that there's many ways to approach this, and but getting yourself out there so that your business is actually a business, in other words, you've got clients, before you think about the next thing is a
Yeah.
very important strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the key thing to remember when creating a budget is that it isn't easy, but you really shouldn't stress about it because your budget is not set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a work in progress that's designed to really help you design your businesses, to really help you, I guess, determine your business's financial state. And when necessary, it provides groundwork where you can make your changes. It's meant to be flexible, but it really always has your end goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are really starting their budget, on a shoestring, I really have included an article about that in the list of links that we're going to be providing at the end of the interview.
Awesome. People in the audience might be getting a little bit overwhelmed right now because there's many points in starting a business where you might feel overwhelmed, like, oh, there's all these things and I don't know about pretty much any of them. And I think this would be a good place to encourage people to keep going, that every person that you look out that has a business that's an inspiration to you went through these same things.
Exactly.
So it's really a matter of, get some information and then just do the things. And like you said, it can take a year to get a business really up and running and a couple more years for it to get really successful. Again, however you define that. But one of those factors is usually finances, that you have enough income coming in that supports you. So
can I just add, I also think that when you're doing that, you have to really recognize that things are not going to go as smoothly as you think or you want them to. It goes back to that flexibility. You have to be able to switch gears and make changes and tweak certain things in order to make your business work. And I think if you are not afraid to do that, or understand that that's part of the process, you're really further along in
Hmm.
terms of making your business a success.
Hmm. And that reminds me of another thing, which is to not get into a place of analysis paralysis, where you go get so much information and that's all you're doing is trying to learn about these things that you actually don't do anything. So, get some basic information, but then just start doing the things. There's no such thing as perfection. It will never be there. It's a moving target. It's always 5 steps ahead of you. So just strong encouragement to just start doing the things, get a little bit of information and do that thing, and then keep going like that, one step in front of the other.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
This is great. I think I'm learning a lot of things, and I hope our audience is learning a lot as well.
So do I.
So,
I hope so too.
yeah. So, what would your advice be to people who, when they were listening to your recommendations around being financially ready and having savings or having a partner? I think that a lot of my audience are people who kind of have a day job that they want to get out of, and they may not be making a lot of money already.
Hmm.
So, the idea of starting a business and having money socked away might feel a little bit impossible. What are some options for how people might get some help or get started if they don't have a lot of funds?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really, I really am for is having a partnership, doing
Mm,
doing it with someone else. When you know at the beginning that you can't, or for some reason you can't or don't want to handle all the aspects of your business operation, joining into a partnership is really a consideration. But just like a marriage, partnerships have their pros and cons. Namely, they require a good working relationship and effective communication between the partners. And each person needs to understand his or her role. And you, as one of the owners, have to recognize that you're not a sole proprietor, and you're going to face situations where opinions differ drastically. So you have to be willing to compromise. I am a full believer in partnership. I think the idea of having someone else to bounce things off of, and just having some other another someone that's going to boost your confidence, and someone that's going to help you, get over the humps and give you some advice, or at least share advice between each other, is really a good way to start a business.
mhm.
So, I'd be interested to know your thoughts about partnerships, as far as the type of business that you're talking about becoming a doula is concerned.
Yeah, I would say in general about partnerships is it's a beautiful way for people with complementary skills to come together, So I might be really good at writing websites, and marketing and thinking about those kind of things, but I'm not so good at doing the taxes or managing the books. And so somebody
Hmm.
else might be really good at managing the books and doesn't want to do the marketing. So we would be really good partners. And that's one of the things that when doulas come to me and they're thinking about a partnership arrangement, that's not the most important thing, but it's a really nice benefit if you can find a partner with complementary skills.
Hmm.
But I think the
Well,
most important thing is that you find somebody who has a similar philosophy and style, particularly
exactly.
when you're in something that's about, providing intimate service to people. So in the birth world, as you might think, people are on call because birth isn't scheduled. Well, some births are
Hmm.
scheduled, but the majority of births aren't scheduled, which means people are on call, and that can be really challenging and so partnerships are really a great solution for that, where people can trade a call schedule so they're not on call all the time. And almost all midwives work in that capacity. Most physicians work in a group capacity, and nurses, they have schedules, so they get to go home after their 8 or 12 hours. Doulas, it's a more recent phenomenon. So when I became a doula back in 2001, in my community, there were almost no partnerships. Now there's many, 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 because people are just like, to heck with that. I'm not going to live a life where I'm always on call, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, there's also agencies are pretty popular where there's maybe one or two owners of the agency, and then they
Hmm.
contract with other doulas, and then kind of the whole pool of doulas within that agency can serve as backup and call schedules and things like that. There's many different ways that an agency might be set up, but those are the two models that help doulas to overcome that problem of being on call all the time. But one of the things I think that partnerships run into is the financial stuff again. Like, if you could tell us what are some of the considerations about being in a partnership? Do you have to have legal contracts because you're going to be
Well,
sharing money?
yeah, I did want to mention that because one of the things you said made me think about the fact that partnerships are not always 50-50.
Mm,
Sometimes, what are the delegated responsibilities for each partner? And then how is that partner going to be compensated? So I think there are a lot of ins and outs that make a successful partnership. And one of the things that I really suggest is if you go into a partnership arrangement, you need to have an agreement, a partnership agreement that's signed by all parties involved. And that way you spell out everything in writing in the event that something comes into question. And one of the links talks about partnership one of the links that we're going to have talks about partnership. And also, if anyone is interested in a sample or a template for a partnership agreement, they should reach out to me because I can
mhm.
provide you with that.
Nice.
Another, I guess, going on to, moving on to the next step. If you have your business set up now and you've been doing a good job selling your business or your service, but you're not ready to take on the responsibilities of being an employer, this is where you need to consider maybe hiring a contractor. And I'm going to use myself as an example because I mentioned before that I've written grant proposals for nonprofits. I still do for two small nonprofits, and we work by contract. They pay the full amount that we agree, and they're relieved of all the employer obligations. I'm responsible for paying the taxes and anything else other than all they do is pay. So that's the next thing that you can consider if you're not ready to actually hire staff.
Mhm.
Um, and when you do get to the point of being ready to hire staff, your sales are good, your business feels sustainable, and you want to hire a full or a part-time employee, you're ready to delegate responsibilities to someone else and you're ready to pay a salary. Then you're comfortable with also covering the associated taxes and, I guess, as appropriate, any other benefits that you need to provide.
Mhm.
But the big difference between hiring contractors and employers is in a contract situation, the employer has the last word. When I write proposals, the ED, the executive director, has the final say so about what's submitted. He or she is the contact person. My name and information doesn't appear anywhere on the proposal. Once you're hiring someone, you might still have the final say so, but ideally, you have enough faith in that person to delegate the responsibilities and duties to that person and feel comfortable doing so.
Mhm. And those are really good points that you bring up. When I started, not wasn't when exactly when I started my business, but a few years into my business, I did hire an assistant, and she was an employee. And whoa, all the responsibility that entailed, paying for Medicare taxes and income taxes and filing all those things with the government and making sure that I was doing all the things I was supposed to do as a good employer. It was a lot. I was also really proud that I was able to do those things and that I was able to, part-time employ somebody and know that I was contributing to them helping their family. But it was a lot of work. And after that, any people that I had that were doing some of the work for my business, I had as contracted employees, and that was so much easier. Are there any particular benefits that you would be able to share with the audience about having somebody be an employee different than contracted staff?
Well, what I can say from personal experience is that I'm not a good manager. So I do not do well having employees because my expectations of myself are high and my expectations of my employee are just as high.
Mhm.
And so when that's the case, you kind of setting yourself up for disappointment because everyone's not going to be able to fill the shoes that you think that they should. So in terms of hiring an employer, you need to really think about whether you're good a good employer material. Are you really ready to be able to accept what comes along with being an employer? I mean, things like they do have a personal life, things are going to come up, things that are going to interrupt your flow of business. Are you going to be able to jump in and substitute when that person can't do what they're supposed to do? There's a lot to think about in terms of being an employer. So before you take on that role, I think you need to really decide whether you're the type of person for that, have
Mhm.
that kind of role. And I think in terms of deciding on your business, that's going to be a factor too. If your business grows, how are you going to be? Are you going to be a good person to serve as an employer for others? And like I said, I've learned over the years that I am not a good employer. So it's hard for me to tell people, how I can think of the things that you need to have, in your wheelhouse to be a good employer, but I'm not a good example.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good information. Thanks for letting us know that. So, what are some of the challenges that you think either somebody starting out a business or that's new to running a business? What are common challenges that they might face?
There are so many challenges that could possibly come up. I'll mention a few, but there's just a lot of things that could come up. But one of the things that I think I found challenging was marketing your business and the social media, the networking, the attending events, and basically just getting word out about your business. This is another whole side of business
Mhm.
success. And this was the hardest part for me because, like I said, I am an introvert by nature. So this aspect of growing your business this way does not come easily for me. So if you're not an outgoing person, there's a few things that you need to do. I think the first thing you need to do is learn some of the ways that you can market your business. Then I think you need to figure out those ways that don't wreak havoc with your personal comfort level, the things that you're going to be able to do easily. And then you just have to jump in and do it. You got to get out there and practice, and because that's the only way that you're going to get better at it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Another thing about marketing is when the time comes, that might be one of the first tasks that you outsource. If it's not, especially if it's not one of your strong points. And this is particularly true about social media marketing.
Mhm.
Social media marketing takes a lot of time and effort and eats into the time that you have to devote to running your business or producing your product. So I think that's for me, social media, just marketing in general, is one of the areas that I would first consider outsourcing.
Mhm. When I was starting my business, I hated marketing. And I often talk about this when I talk about my kind of origin story in becoming a marketing consultant, the irony of that. And one of the things that I realized that I hated marketing is because I really didn't understand what it was. I thought it was advertising, and those are actually two pretty different things.
Mhm.
Once I learned marketing, which was like, unfortunately, 10 years into my business, I realized it's really fun. It's really creative. If you're doing social media marketing, that is a hungry, hungry beast. So, yeah, that's a great place to get help, somebody that does it all the time. And so they kind of keep up with it and know all the ins and outs. But once you learn just some of the basics of marketing, that can really both lower the resistance and increase the
Mhm.
effectiveness. And I'm just going to put a little plug in here for myself that I do offer marketing coaching and consultation. I do copywriting because writing is another area that people often
Mhm.
struggle with.
Mhm.
And for doulas specifically, specifically, I offer a 9-month business and marketing coaching program that is designed to help people do a lot of the things that we're talking about, including learn how to market from the get-go. So
I think another thing when considering social marketing is the advantage of having a partner. So you don't have to do it alone. Each
yeah.
partner can take responsibility for managing specific sites. For example, I'm currently working on a project with someone, with a partner, and we've chosen which sites we're going to post on. And we
Mhm.
just, we take responsibility for those particular sites. I think also, just to plug my blog, there is a couple of articles that are going to be in the list about marketing your business and some successful networking tips, which
Mhm.
I found to be really helpful. Another thing I think people don't consider is competition. Okay, so you have a great business idea, but have you taken the time to see if anybody is already offering the service or product that you plan to provide? You have to always do your research, check out what the competition is doing and how they're doing it.
Mhm.
You want to figure out if there's anything you can do differently to make your business stand out. And I think it's also important to keep abreast of technology that applies to your business because you can be sure that that's what your competitors are doing. It's
Mhm.
just smart business sense.
Mhm. Yeah.
So competition is really thinking about competition is really a big challenge that a lot of people don't consider
Mhm.
until it's too late, until
Mhm.
they get to a situation where they realize, oh, I have competition. What am I going to do about this? How am I
Mhm.
going to handle this?
Right. I recently heard the idea of competition reframed, and it was super helpful for me. And the reframe is that if there's people already out there doing what you're doing, that means that there's a demand for it.
Hmm.
So instead of saying, oh, shoot, there's already, 100 doulas in my areas, they don't need 101. Yeah, they do probably, because especially in a career that is growing, because the career is relatively new, people are still learning about your area of business. There is
Hmm.
a lot of potential. I'm also a big fan of the abundance mentality, that there's actually enough food on the planet to feed everyone if we would organize it better. There's actually enough money for everyone if we didn't funnel it all to less than 1% of the population. Everything that we need is out there. When it comes to doulas, the statistics are that less than 10% of people use doulas, but over 75% know about them. So like
Hmm.
there's a huge marketing opportunity. And it also tells us that there are so many people giving birth that aren't using doulas. So one more, 10 more, 100 more doulas in a community, there's actually births for them to attend. It's just a matter of getting oneself out there. So don't let competition turn you away, but do let it inspire you. And the thing that you mentioned, Brenda, that I think is so important is, what's your unique thing? What sets you apart? Don't
Yeah.
try to copy and be exactly like somebody else, even if they're super successful, because it's their secret sauce that makes them successful. And your
Hmm.
job as a new kid on the block is to find out and communicate what your secret sauce is. So,
Exactly. And that's
yeah.
just what I was getting ready to say because it's really important to understand that your business needs to have something that you're offering, if you can, something that you're offering that no one else is doing, or that you can do differently or more effectively.
Hmm.
And the other thing to realize is you can always have a business when there's something that other people don't want to do, that's always a resource for having a business. So just, thinking about that, even if there's an aspect of the business that your competition isn't addressing, you might be able to step in and be able to be the one to offer that particular, side of the business. So
Hmm.
competition is really, I think competition is healthy. It's
Yeah.
a very healthy situation because it presses you, it makes you think about how you can enhance your business,
Hmm.
what you can do
Yeah.
to enhance your business.
Totally. Yeah.
I think the last thing that I really think about in terms of a challenge is just the whole idea of keeping records about your business. You
Mm.
have to make the time to keep up with this task along with everything else you're trying to accomplish. And record keeping requires organization. So you need to think about, do you have the organizational skills required to keep track of all the details you need to keep track of? And if not, this is something you'll have to learn pretty quickly.
Hmm.
because things can get away from you. I have a friend who has a business, and she just told me that she hasn't done her business taxes for 3 years. I was appalled because so much can happen. You have to stay on top of these things because that's the only way your business is really going to be successful. Number one, it weighs on her. It's something that has been weighing on her, and to the point that now she's afraid. So
Hmm.
you need to be able to attack some of these things, or, when they first come up, so that you don't have to get to the point of being afraid to deal with them.
Hmm. Yeah.
I just think that recognizing and proactively addressing your challenges early on is what's going to contribute to long-term business success.
Hmm. That's reminding me of in the first 5 years of my business, I had a business buddy. And we weren't partners, but we were in the same field. We were both starting out, and we would, do our own research and learn about, good business habits. And we, had different ideas about certain things. And we would get together twice a year, every 6 months. One of those visits was to kind of set our goals for the following year. We do 1 year goals and 5 years 5 year goals, but each year we appraised them. And one of the things that was great about having a business buddy was having that person that I could turn to and say, I feel like I'm really kind of messing up right here, or I'm really afraid of this thing, or like, I don't have enough money in the bank to pay taxes this year.
Mhm,
Like, what do I do? And we could just bounce those ideas. And it was a safe place to take those
mhm,
concerns.
mhm, mhm.
Because otherwise I don't think that I would have had somebody else to, to talk about my fears with, and
Right.
somebody that I also trusted to not like report me to the business police, but instead to say, okay, I got your back, but I'm gonna hold you up so that you can face this, because
Yeah.
you're not going to turn away and hide. And I think that was just a really healthy arrangement that we had. And I recommend folks have a business buddy.
I think the buzzword today for business buddy is an accountability partner.
Hmm.
And it's something that, I think every business owner, I think everybody should
Hmm.
have an accountability partner, someone that's going to make you think about what you're doing, how you're doing, and how you're doing it, and the best way to move forward. Because I
Hmm.
think all have stumbling blocks that we
Yep.
have to deal with, whether it's in your personal life or your business life. And having someone to be able to talk those things through, even if they can't give you the answer, they can point you in the direction of thinking about how to resolve the issue.
Hmm.
So I think a business buddy or an accountability partner is definitely a plus
Hmm.
in your life.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm glad we agree on that. I think the last question that I have is kind of related to the record keeping, is anything that new business owners should know about taxes and expenses and tracking and those kinds of things. I think that is a big unknown, kind of scary area for a lot of people. What's your advice for a new business owner starting out to be able to manage their finances and be able to pay taxes when the time comes?
I think you should talk to an accountant.
Okay.
I think definitely you should talk to an accountant, because before, and not necessarily the accountant that you're going to have. Most accountants, when you reach out to them initially, you can start out by asking them questions. And they're usually willing, if they're a good accountant, they usually will be willing to be honest with you and answer your questions. And you may not choose to have that, use that particular accountant, but I think a good accountant should always be willing to explain
Hmm.
what you need to do.
Hmm.
So my advice to someone, if you're feeling uncomfortable in that area, is to just seek out an accountant and talk to them, ask
Hmm.
questions.
Yeah, and in my experience, doing that sooner rather than later is a good idea, because if you contact them really early on, they'll tell you what to do so that when it's time to file taxes, you have everything in order, instead of
Exactly.
it's tax time and now they're like, okay, I need your past, these records. And you're like, I didn't keep them. And you have to go find them or recreate them and things like that.
And it's much more expensive to start out the right way with an accountant, if you are, than my my friend that I'm talking about that has done her taxes 3 years, she told me she has everything, all her receipts in a box. And she's going to have to hand that box over, and it's going to cost her so much more
Mm-hmm.
to have the accountant go through all of that and do it than if had she started in the beginning,
Yeah.
doing it the right way.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Oh, Brenda, this has been great. You are so wise and filled with knowledge. Anything that we haven't talked about that you think that new business owners just must know?
I think you need to understand that as a new business owner, you do not know everything. You need to reach out to people that are in business for themselves. You need to do your research. You need to make sure that you're comfortable with the business you're starting, that you feel confident that that this is something that you're going to be able to do successfully. It just requires a lot of pre-thought and consideration for whether business ownership is for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it are you really going to be better off owning your business as opposed to working for someone else?
Mm-hmm.
You need
Yeah.
to weigh that and see where you really stand with that and be honest with yourself. Some people are not cut out to be business
Mm-hmm.
owners.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and the sooner you can realize that and recognize that, the better off you'll be.
Mm-hmm. I actually did think of another question that I forgot to ask earlier, and that is when you were talking about kind of getting startup funds for a business, and you were mentioning getting a home equity line of credit. What are your thoughts or opinions on how does one decide whether they should get a line of credit or a credit card for their business or a loan of some kind? Basically, what are the situations in which it feels reasonable and safe to go into debt, and when doesn't it? And I'm also wondering particularly if it's like, are there guidelines around these are the things you do not want to go in debt over, like buying your groceries, but these are the things that do make more sense. And what's a good approach to manage any debt that you get into for starting a business?
Well, I think if you get into debt, you need to be able to, first of all, feel like you're going to be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
If before you use that credit card or before go get a homeowner's equity line, you need to think about how you're going to pay this back.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's such a thing as good debt and bad debt. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the good debt is the debt that you feel confident that you will be able to pay back. And of course, the opposite is bad debt. But as far as the business owner is concerned, if you have enough confidence in your business and you feel like you need to reach into your credit, which is your personal, it's a personal benefit that you have available to you. If you have a lot of people don't have good credit.
Mm-hmm.
So those who do have good credit, that's a benefit that you have and you can use accordingly. But I don't think you should use it unless you feel relatively sure that it's not going to be really become a burden. And
Mm-hmm.
I say things like, I also say that I think in one of the articles I wrote, I said something like taxes are not a burden unless you can't pay them. you know,
Yeah.
if you can pay your taxes, then it's not a burden. If you feel like your business is going to be successful enough, or you're at a point where you at least, you feel comfortable taking out that loan, then I encourage you to do so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about, again, especially when people are starting out, they might want to get a new computer. They might want to hire, a designer to make their website for them. They might want to go to some extra trainings that can, the cost of those can start to really add up, but would add to their ability to do their work even better. And using your overarching idea of if you can pay it back, it's okay to go into debt. Would any of those things be something you would just say, absolutely no, you should not go into debt for those things?
I think that's a personal decision.
Yeah.
I can't
Okay.
say specifically what you should and shouldn't go into debt for.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to assess what your needs are, and I mean, sometimes maybe there's another way. But
Mhm.
that really is personal. I really, I can't specifically say what you would need to do. I think you need to be creative in building your business. And if that means borrowing a computer from someone else or doing your work in the library until you can afford a computer, then that's what you'd have to do. But again, it's a personal decision, and it's based on where you stand financially in terms of being able to support your business.
Mhm. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Well, thank you again. Any parting words?
Just if you think you're a good potential for business ownership and you feel like you have the traits, I think you should go for it, because with recognizing that it's a difference between being a business owner and an employer. If you're willing to take on those responsibilities, I say go for it, because business ownership really affords you a lot of advantages. I love being a business owner. I love working from home. I love working on the in the time frame that I want to do. I have been retired for, let me see. I got laid off my last job when I was 55, I guess maybe. That was a long time ago. I mean, I'm not giving up my age, but I've been retired for a lot of years and I have enjoyed every minute of
Mhm,
it. And one of the ways that you can actually move, I think you can move quickly towards retirement is through business ownership,
mhm,
and hope and getting great, raising your business to the point where you can consider retiring.
mhm.
That can be one of your goals.
Yeah.
So I promote business ownership 100%.
As do I. I think about, as a business owner, you meet so many more people than you do when you work for a company. Then you just meet the people in your department typically.
Mhm.
And that's been the most rewarding thing about owning a business is all the customers that I get to come in contact with, all the other people in my profession that we network and are supporting each other. And it has just enhanced my life tremendously, in addition to being able to, set my own hours and work from home and those things as
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, we're on the same page with that. Thanks again for sharing your expertise and all your experience and knowledge with us. I know the audience is going to be really lucky to get to learn from you in this way. And again, we'll put all of the links and resources that we've referenced on a slide at the end of this recording. And good luck to you, and go for it if this is something that feels right for you. Best wishes on your journey to owning your own business.
Exactly. In addition to the links, I can also be reached on Twitter, on Instagram, and Pinterest and LinkedIn. So I've
Awesome.
done my social media homework.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome.
So
Wonderful. Thank you again, Brenda. So
thank you for
appreciate you being
having
here.
me.
Yeah,
Thank you
my
for having
pleasure.
me.